The Forgotten World and the Blade of No Name. Long ago, before anyone could remember, humans ruled the stars. They built great cities in the sky and ships that could travel across galaxies. But then, something happened. The human empire disappeared. It was lost to time. And now, no one believed it ever existed. Many years later, on the edge of space, there was a lonely mining colony called Orion 5. It was a dry, dusty world full of rocks, machines, and forgotten dreams. People didn't come here for fun. They came to work. They came to survive. In the middle of this rough world lived a young human boy named Jace Raylan. He was 17, thin and fast, with dirt on his boots and sharp eyes. Jace was a miner, like everyone else in the colony. He had no family, no past, and no future, or so he thought. Jace spent his days digging deep into the ground with heavy tools. He searched for vibronite, a rare blue crystal that was used in alien weapons. The alien masters paid little for the work, but it was better than starving. But Jace was not like the others. He was curious. He asked questions. He read old Earth books passed down in secret. His favorite stories were about brave human warriors, lost kingdoms, and weapons made of light. Most people laughed at those stories. Humans were never special, they would say. We are just labor for the high-born aliens now. Jace never believed that. One day, while mining in the outer zone, Zone X, where the ground was unstable, Jace felt a sudden tremor. The earth shook under his feet. Rocks cracked open, and a strange blue glow leaked from the deep crack in the ground. "Whoa! What is that?" Jace whispered, stepping closer. The others ran away in fear, but not Jace. He waited until the shift ended, then climbed down into the crack. It was narrow, dark, and deep. He used his lamp to see ahead, and what he found made his heart pound. Below the earth, hidden for who knows how long, was a stone door covered in glowing marks. It didn't look alien. It looked human, but old. Very old. As he touched it, the door slid open with a deep rumble, like it had been waiting for someone. Jace stepped inside. The chamber beyond was huge and silent. It was made of black stone and smooth metal. Strange symbols lit up on the walls, glowing soft white and gold. In the center of the room stood a stone pedestal, and stuck in it was a sword. It was like nothing Jace had ever seen. The sword's blade was silver blue, with markings that moved like water. Its handle was shaped like wings, and it pulsed with a heartbeat, like it was alive. Dust covered everything, yet the sword looked untouched by time. "Is this real?" Jace whispered. He looked around. No guards, no traps, just silence. Then a voice echoed in the back of his mind. It was soft, old, and powerful. "Hair of the Flame, your hand awakens what was forgotten." Jace's heart raced. He took a deep breath and reached for the blade. As soon as his fingers touched the hilt, the sword flashed with light. Energy surged through his arm. The glowing marks on the wall lit up brighter, spreading across the chamber. Symbols appeared on Jace's skin, glowing gold. The stone under his feet began to shift. The chamber trembled. The floor started to rise, like an ancient elevator. Above ground, machines in the alien towers began to scream. Alarms went off. Satellites picked up a strange energy signal from deep under Orion 5. In a faraway alien city, a tall figure in a red robe turned toward the sound. "The signal," he said, his voice sharp. "It has awakened. After all this time." Back in the chamber, Jace held the sword tightly as the platform rose higher. He looked up and saw light breaking through the cracks in the rocks above. He didn't know where it was taking him. He didn't know what the blade really was. But he knew one thing. His life had just changed forever. And far away in deep space, old machines blinked to life. Forgotten computers whispered in dead languages. Ancient maps redrew themselves. Somewhere, something had remembered humanity, and it had begun to wake up. The throne that waited for a human. The ground above was still shaking when Jace finally rose from the deep stone chamber. The platform lifted him through layers of broken earth and forgotten rock. He clutched the glowing sword in his hand, his fingers trembling from the energy flowing through it. Dust and light poured in from the surface above as a hole opened with a loud crack. For a moment, Jace shielded his eyes. When he stepped out, he wasn't where he expected. He was no longer in the outer mining zone. Instead, he stood on a wide black stone platform. Around him were giant metal towers, covered in rust and vines. Strange, round buildings floated above the ground, held up by soft humming energy. There were no people, no machines, no sound. The wind whispered through empty halls. It was a city, but not the one he knew. This place was older, silent, abandoned. "What is this place?" Jace whispered. He turned slowly, the sword still warm in his grip. In the middle of the platform stood a tall black gate. Its doors were closed, and strange carvings ran up the sides. They looked like human writing, but ancient. On the gate, a symbol glowed, the same one that had appeared on Jace's arm earlier, a flame inside a circle. As he stepped closer, the sword vibrated. "Come forth, hair of flame," said a deep voice, not out loud, but inside his mind. Jace froze. Who are you?" No answer came. The sword pulsed again. The gate groaned and slowly opened. Inside was a massive throne room, wider than any ship hangar and taller than the colony towers. The walls were made of dark stone and smooth glass. Lights floated like stars in the air above. On the floor was a long golden path leading to the throne, an enormous chair made of glowing crystal and black steel. It sat high above the ground, resting on steps of metal. Symbols moved across it like waves. The throne looked like it had been waiting a very long time. Jace walked forward slowly. With every step, the blade got brighter. When he reached the bottom of the steps, the voice spoke again, clearer this time. "You have awakened what was lost. The blood of the first flame flows in you. Sit and remember." Jace climbed the steps, heart pounding. He didn't know why, but something inside him said, "This is where I belong." He sat. At once, light exploded around him. The throne lit up with gold and red fire. The sword floated in front of him, spinning in the air. The walls of the room changed. Images flickered like memories. Old battles, human warriors in glowing armor, ships shaped like dragons and stars. And then a face appeared in front of Jace. A hologram. A man in armor, with dark eyes and a scar across his face. His voice was strong but full of sadness. "If you see this message, it means the line of kings has broken. Our people have fallen. The throne sleeps, but hope remains." Jace stared, wide-eyed. "You are the flame's heir," the message continued, "chosen not by blood, but by heart. This blade responds to only one thing, human will. The will to rise, to fight, to protect." The message showed human cities burning, aliens rising in power, human armies dying, their last ships escaping. "We hid this throne. We buried the sword. If one of us survives, if one of us dares to dream again, then rise. Reclaim what was ours. Light the flame once more." The message ended. Silence returned. Jace leaned back, overwhelmed. "I don't understand. I'm just a miner," he whispered. "I can't be what they want." The sword dropped gently into his lap. The flame symbol on his arm glowed stronger. He wasn't alone anymore. But far away, across space, others had noticed. Meanwhile, in the alien high tower, in the golden city of Turzan, home of the alien empire's rulers, alarms echoed across their sky palace. The High Lords gathered in panic. A tall alien in silver armor, eyes glowing red, stood before a round table. "The signal has returned," he said, voice like metal. "Which one?" asked a voice from the shadows. The human flame. Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Impossible. That line was broken centuries ago. Yet the sword has awakened. One of them stepped forward. She had sharp blue skin and long black fingers. Her name was Kalara, the seer. Send the hunter ships. Now, she hissed, if a human child has claimed the blade, then we must end him before he unites the old blood. And what if he reaches the throne? Another asked. The seer narrowed her eyes. Then this war begins again. Back on Orion 5. Jace stood outside the throne room, now breathing heavy. He looked at the horizon, and for the first time, noticed the stars seemed brighter. Behind him, the ancient city came to life. Lights blinked on in the towers. Old machines started humming. Hidden guns rose from the ground. Something old and human was waking up. Then he heard a strange noise from the sky above. Engines, not human ones, alien ones. He turned quickly. Black shapes flew above the horizon. Hunter ships, small, fast, and deadly. They were coming for him. Jace looked down at the sword in his hand. I guess this is real now, he whispered. He took a deep breath and ran. The first fight, and the sword that talks. The sky above Orion 5 turned dark, not from clouds, but from the shadows of the hunter ships. There were 5 of them, sleek, black, fast. Their wings curved like blades, their engines screamed like beasts. These ships belonged to the Zork, the alien empire's silent assassins. They didn't send warnings. They didn't talk. They hunted and they killed. And they were coming for Jace. He ran across the stone path of the ancient city, sword clutched tight in his hand. His breath came fast. The strange marks on his arm were still glowing. The throne room behind him faded into shadow, but its warmth still burned in his chest. They're coming, Jace whispered to himself. They found me. Then he heard it. A voice. Inside his mind. Calm. Strong. Familiar. Why do you run, hair of flame? Jace stumbled to a stop behind a broken wall. Who's there? He asked aloud, breathing hard. I am the Blade of Origin, the voice replied. You awakened me. You carry me. And I fight with you. Jace looked down at the sword. It pulsed again, soft but alive. You're the sword? He asked slowly. Yes, I remember all who have held me. I remember the kings, the warriors, the final stand. I remember fire, and now I remember you. Jace didn't know whether to be scared or amazed. I've never fought before, he admitted. I'm just a miner. That may be true, but your blood burns with the will of your kind. That is enough. I will guide your hand, but you must choose to stand. Jace looked up. The hunter ships were circling lower now. And then 3 shadows dropped from the sky. Zork assassins. They landed with a thud, tall, armored, faces covered in black masks. Their weapons were long spears crackling with blue energy. Silent, precise. One stepped forward and raised its weapon. Return the blade. Die quickly. Jace's grip tightened. I don't think so. The assassin charged. In a flash, Jace lifted the sword. His body moved fast, too fast. The blade hummed. It moved like light. Say it, the voice whispered in his mind. Say the word. What word? Jace shouted. The assassin swung. Jace shouted the first thing that came to his mind. Shield. At once, the sword flared. A golden light burst out, forming a glowing shield in front of him. The alien spear slammed into it and shattered into sparks. The alien stumbled back. Jace stared at the shield in shock. It faded, but the sword still pulsed. Did I do that? You did. Now again. Fight. Jace charged. He didn't know how to swing. He didn't know battle. But the sword guided him. His feet moved with speed. His arms flowed like water. The blade struck the first assassin in the chest. Clean, fast, final. The alien dropped without a sound. The others attacked together, one from the front, one from behind. Spin, jump, slice. Jace obeyed. He twisted to the side, ducked, and leaped over a swing. The blade came down with a crack of blue energy. The second assassin fell. The last one tried to escape, but Jace's blade flew from his hand, glowing like a star, and struck the alien's back mid-run. Silence returned. 3 dead assassins. Jace stood still, breathing heavily. His hands shook. He looked around the ruined city. The fight was over. But he didn't feel like a hero. He felt scared. He dropped to one knee. "What's happening to me?" he whispered. "You are waking up," said the sword softly. "You are remembering what your kind truly is. You are human. You are more than they told you." Jace stayed quiet for a moment. Then he looked up at the stars. Meanwhile, a watcher watches. From the top of a crumbling tower, a figure stood in silence. She wore a cloak that shimmered between gray and black. Her eyes were silver, not quite human, but not fully alien either. Her name was Lyra, and she had seen the whole fight. "The flame has returned," she whispered, "after all this time." Then she turned and disappeared into the shadows. Back in the stars, in the Zorke worship above the planet, a tall alien watched the battle through a screen. He saw the sword. He saw the light. He saw the 3 dead assassins. And he was not pleased. "Send word to the High Seer," he said coldly. "The boy lives. The blade is real. And worse." He narrowed his glowing eyes. "He knows how to use it." Back on the ground, Jace searches. Jace didn't sleep that night. He stayed in the ruins of the ancient city, near the throne. The machines were still waking up around him. The lights still glowed. And the sword stayed warm in his hands, like a living heart. He walked through old halls. He found murals, humans in golden armor, fighting side by side, ships flying in formation, a banner of a rising flame. He sat on the steps of the throne. "I don't know if I can do this," he said out loud. "You don't have to be ready," said the sword. "You just have to keep going." He smiled weakly. Then he noticed something in the sky. A red flare, fired from far beyond the mining colony. It wasn't an attack. It was a signal. Someone had seen the light. Someone was calling him. He stood up and gripped the sword tighter. "I guess I better find out who." He turned toward the direction of the flare and started walking. The one who remembers. The red flare faded in the sky, but its meaning was clear. It was a signal, not a trap, not a warning. A message. "Come. I'm here." Jace stood at the edge of the ancient city, the sword still glowing softly in his hand. The sun was rising over Orion 5, painting the broken towers in gold. The wind carried dust and silence. But the path ahead was clear. He had to go. He didn't know who had fired the signal, or why. But something inside him, something older than fear, told him this was important. He walked for hours, following the old trails through the wasteland. His boots kicked up sand and ash. The sword floated slightly at his side, its tip never dragging, always ready. By midday, he saw smoke in the distance, a fire. As he moved closer, he heard the sound of metal striking metal. Clang, clang, clang. It wasn't battle. It was rhythm. Someone was working. The hidden outpost. Jace climbed a rocky hill and looked down. Tucked between cliffs was a hidden shelter, part stone, part metal, built into the earth. A solar tower stood nearby, half working. A windmill turned slowly in the dry breeze. At the center, a man stood at an anvil, hammering a piece of metal. Sparks flew around him. His hair was gray. His back was broad. His arms were marked with old battle scars. He looked human. Jace hesitated, then walked down the path. The man didn't look up. "You're early," he said, voice like gravel. "Didn't think you'd make it this fast." Jace stopped. "You sent the signal." The man nodded. "Saw the light from your fight. That blade hasn't burned that bright in over 200 years. Jace blinked. Who are you?" The man finally looked up. His eyes were sharp, full of storms and stories. "Name's Thorn. General Elias Thorn. Last of the human warborn." Jace's heart skipped. "You're a general." "I was," Thorn said, returning to his work. "Back when humans still fought like they meant it. Before we gave up." Jace stepped closer. "I didn't think anyone else remembered." Thorn looked at him, then at the sword. "I don't just remember," he said. "I bled for it." Stories in the dust. Inside the shelter, Thorn lit a small fire and offered Jace water. The walls were covered in old flags, broken weapons, and photos long faded by time. A dusty armor suit hung in the corner, tall, dark, marked with the flame symbol. Jace sat and watched as Thorn pulled out a metal tablet and tapped on it. "I've been tracking the old signals since I went underground," he said. "When the flame throne went dark, most thought it was dead. I knew it was only sleeping." Jace leaned forward. "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Thorn looked at him, calm but tired. "Tell who?" "The other humans. They're broken, scared, beaten into silence. You talk about ancient power, and they laugh. You mention the blade, and they walk away." Jace looked at the sword in his lap. "But it's real." Thorn nodded slowly. "Yes. And now, so are you." The warning. Later, as the sky darkened again, Thorn showed Jace a hologram of the galaxy. Red lines marked alien-controlled systems. Blue dots showed old human colonies, most of them abandoned. "This is what we lost," Thorn said. "Whole worlds, whole fleets, not because we were weak, but because we were betrayed." "Betrayed?" Jace asked. Thorn pointed to a symbol at the center of the map. The flame throne wasn't just a seat. It was a command center. It controlled human ships, weapons, even war AI. When the last king died, the throne locked itself. No one could use it. Not even me. Jace frowned. "So we couldn't fight back." "We tried," Thorn said. "But without the throne, we lost coordination. We lost hope." Jace touched the sword's hilt. "So now it's awake. I can fix this." Thorn looked at him hard. "You can try. But the throne tests every hair. It won't serve someone who's not ready." "Test me how?" Thorn didn't answer. He simply pointed toward the sky. "The enemy approaches." Just then, the ground shook. Both men stood. Jace looked toward the horizon. Engines, lights, dust. Thorn cursed. "They found us." 4 alien speeders raced toward the outpost. Small, fast, with twin cannons on each side. Thorn grabbed his old plasma rifle. "We hold them here. No running." Jace stepped forward. "Let me help." Thorn looked at him. "You sure you're ready for this?" Jace nodded. "No, but I'll fight anyway." The battle begins. The speeders stopped just outside the outpost. 4 alien warriors jumped down, taller than the assassins before, covered in white armor with sharp glowing eyes. One of them stepped forward, his voice robotic. "Return the blade. This is your only chance." Jace raised the sword. Thorn cocked his rifle. "You want it," Jace said. "Come take it." The aliens attacked. Thorn fired first, blue energy bolts slamming into the first warrior's chest. Jace moved like lightning. The sword glowed red this time, not gold. It roared in his hands. He jumped forward and shouted, "Strike." A wave of fire blasted from the blade, knocking 2 enemies back. The sword whispered, "Well done, flame bearer." Jace dodged a spear throw and spun, slashing across one alien's chest. The armor cracked. The warrior fell. Another aimed a cannon, but Thorn hit him from the side. Watch your back, kid. Jace nodded and charged again. After the fire. Minutes later, the outpost was quiet again. Smoke rose. The 4 alien bodies lay still in the dirt. Jace dropped to one knee, catching his breath. Thorn walked up beside him. You did better than I expected. I had help, Jace said, nodding to the sword. Thorn looked out at the stars. They won't stop coming. This was just the first wave. Jace stood slowly. His eyes were harder now. Sharper. Then we don't stop either. Thorn turned to him. There's something you need to see next. Something buried in the old moon base. It's where the flame signal was first sent, and where the throne's AI first whispered your name. Jace nodded. Let's go. The war wasn't waiting. Neither were they. The rise of the human flame. The sky above Orion 5 was no longer silent. Ashes drifted through the air like snow. Fires burned in the far valleys where alien speeders had fallen. The stars blinked coldly above, but below, something new stirred. No, something old had returned. Jace stood at the edge of the outpost, the blade of origin glowing in his hand. Its light had changed again, deeper, brighter. It no longer flickered. It burned like a living star. Beside him stood General Thorn, his old armor reactivated, humming with energy from forgotten days. Dust blew across the ground as the last bodies of the alien scouts burned in the pit behind them. More will come, Thorn said. I hope so, Jace replied, eyes focused on the stars. Let them come. Thorn raised an eyebrow. You're not afraid anymore. I am, Jace said, gripping the sword. But I'm also angry. They took everything from us. They turned humans into shadows. It ends now. The sword pulsed once in agreement, and the flame within Jace's blood stirred hotter than ever. The plan. Inside Thorn's shelter, the two of them studied maps, signals, and old communication satellites. Most human colonies had gone dark decades ago, but not all of them were dead. We still have listeners, Thorn said. People hiding. Farmers, scavengers, smugglers. Some think the old legends are just stories. Some still believe. Jace stood and stared at the flickering map. I don't want them to believe, he said. I want them to remember. He raised the sword and pointed it toward the sky. It's time to light the galaxy again. The signal. They returned to the flame throne, hidden deep beneath the ancient city. Its walls pulsed with golden veins of energy. The throne no longer slept. It waited. It watched. Jace sat upon it once more. His arm glowed with the full flame symbol. The sword floated in the air before him, spinning slowly. Thorn activated the old transmission systems. For years they had sat useless, dead bones of a dead empire. Not anymore. Jace took a deep breath and began to speak. This is Jace Reelan, human, minor, nobody special. Until I found a blade and a throne, until I remembered who we were. He stood from the throne. The sword rose higher, its flame reaching out like tendrils of gold. We were warriors, dreamers, builders. We ruled the stars with honor. Then we were broken, forgotten, turned into slaves and workers. But the fire is not gone. I lit it again, and it's calling to you. He looked straight into the transmitter lens, eyes fierce and bright. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to be strong. You only need to believe and to fight. If you can hear me, stand up. If you're human, light your fire. We are rising again. The blade has returned. The flame has awakened. This time, we don't kneel. He ended the signal, and somewhere in the corners of the galaxy, people listened. Ripples across the stars. On a deep mining moon, a woman paused mid-shift as her old communicator beeped. When she heard the message, she dropped her tool and looked to the sky. It's real, she whispered. In the black market of Tarnus 9, a human smuggler received the pulse. He turned off the music and stared at the glowing symbol. The throne lives, he muttered. On a forgotten space station, a little girl who had never seen Earth stared at the image of Jace holding the sword. Her father knelt beside her, eyes filled with tears. "He found it," he said. "He really found it." The flames spread. From heart to heart, from planet to planet. The galaxy had forgotten humanity. But now humanity was remembering itself. A new ally. That night, Jace walked outside to breathe. He had barely stepped into the wind when he heard a voice behind him. "You speak like a leader, but you move like a boy." Jace turned quickly, sword raised. A figure stood in the shadows, calm and tall. A woman, cloaked in gray, eyes silver, hair like coal. It was Lyra, the one who had watched him from afar before. "You've been following me," Jace said. "Yes," she replied simply. "Why?" "Because I've seen what you carry, and because I know where this path leads." Jace stepped forward cautiously. "Are you human?" She hesitated. "Half," she said. "My mother was one of the last flame touched. My father wasn't." Jace lowered the blade. "What do you want from me?" Lyra looked up at the stars. "I want to help you win." Training the flame. For days, they trained in the ruined city. Thorn taught Jace how to shoot, how to command, how to think like a general. Lyra taught him how to move, how to listen, how to read the hidden codes of the throne systems. And the sword, it taught him everything else. "You are not a weapon," it said. "You are a torch, a voice, a beginning." Jace learned to call flames from the air, to shield others with energy, to cut through steel with a whisper. The sword bonded with him, mind, body, soul. And his fire grew. The first human army. By the 7th day, the first transports arrived. Old ships, rusty, scared, but flying. Inside them came the first fighters. Not soldiers, people. A mechanic with cybernetic arms. A farmer carrying an old rifle. A mother who hadn't held a weapon in 20 years. A former pilot who thought she'd never fly again. They stood before Jace, unsure, quiet, waiting. He walked to them with the blade glowing at his side. He raised it high. And they fell to one knee, not in submission, but in unity. "I don't need your loyalty," Jace said. "I need your fire. I need your fight." He looked across the dusty field. "And if we burn together, they won't stop us." The blade evolves. That night, the sword changed. It glowed brighter than ever, now wrapped in blue and gold fire. Jace touched it, and it spoke in a voice both old and new. "You have kindled the first spark. The throne sees your heart. The flame rises. The true war begins now." The final message. Back in the alien capital, the seer of the Zor-Kai watched the footage of Jace's speech. She crushed the crystal in her hand. "So be it," she growled. "Then we end the flame forever." She pressed a red rune on the table. "Activate the destroyer fleets, and find me the old traitor, the one called Thorn. I want his head. The fall of the alien empire begins." The night before the first strike, Jace Raylan stood alone beneath the stars. He looked up at the sky, where the alien empires had ruled for generations, and closed his eyes. The blade hovered beside him, glowing quietly. The air around it was warmer, as if the sword shared his breath. Behind him, across the ruins of the ancient city, the newly gathered human army made camp. Their ships sat in rows, old and rusted but patched with care. People from every lost corner of the galaxy stood ready. Miners, builders, refugees, survivors. No one had armor that matched. No one had training. But every one of them believed. And in this war, that belief was fire. The target. Outpost Drenar 4. General Thorn stood over the war table, pointing at a red marker blinking on a dusty map. "This is Drenar 4. A minor alien base near the edge of Sector 10. They store fuel, food, and most importantly, tracking crystals. Jace leaned forward. The same crystals they used to find human heat signatures. Thorn nodded. If we destroy them, we vanish from their scanners. That gives us time to grow before they strike back. Lyra stood nearby, arms crossed. There's also an AI core hidden beneath the outpost, she added. Old tech, possibly human-made. If it still works, we could use it. Jace looked at them both, then at the army behind him. It's time, he said. We light the match today. The human fleet moves. At sunrise, the fleet launched. 32 ships, old, creaky, many missing parts, but each one fueled by flame. Jace stood on the bridge of the Starburner, a former mining hauler now turned warship. The Blade of Origin floated at his side. Its light glowed through the windows like morning fire. Across the fleet, humans sat at controls, held weapons close, whispered prayers they barely remembered. In the heart of every ship, a new message echoed. We are not broken. We are not gone. We are human, and we are coming. First contact. Drenarfor looked peaceful from space. Green cliffs, 3 small towers, a silver dome in the center. Alien guards in black armor walked calmly. They didn't expect a fight here. This was backwater. They had no idea a storm was coming. Jace stood at the edge of the landing bay, his army behind him. He looked to Thorn. You lead the flank. To Lyra, get inside the dome. Find the AI core. To his fighters, no fear, no mercy. You were never weak. You were just waiting to wake up. He raised the sword. It screamed with light. Now go. The battle for Drenarfor. The human ships landed fast. Hatches opened. Fighters charge. The aliens responded too late. Jace led the front assault, blade in hand, fire dancing from its tip. He cut through walls like paper. The sword sang with every swing, shouting ancient words in a dead tongue. Behind him, humans fought with tools turned to weapons. Drills, welding lasers, rail hammers. A miner with a fusion torch burned through an alien gate. A former chef hurled heat grenades made from fuel canisters. A mother shielded her child with one arm and fired with the other. Thorn's team struck from the west, blowing holes in the towers. The aliens, confused by the untrained force, started to fall back. They were losing. Lyra's discovery. Inside the Silver Dome, Lyra moved like a shadow. She found the core beneath the floor, deep underground. The door to the chamber opened when she touched the flame symbol on her arm. Inside sat a giant crystal, blue, cracked, ancient. Around it, machines hummed. On the walls were human words. She touched the control panel. It spoke. Flame signature detected, activating dormant AI. A voice filled the room. Old, calm, human. Welcome, flame bearer. Do you seek the minds of the past? Yes, Lyra said. We need them now. The turning point. Back on the field. The fight rage. Jace was surrounded by 5 alien elites, twice his size, armed with electro-blades. They moved fast, fast enough to match him. He was tired. His breath came rough. His flame was thinning. The blade whispered, "Call them. You are not alone." Jace shouted, not in pain, but in power. For humanity. His voice echoed across the battlefield. The humans heard it, and something happened. The ground shook. The throne beneath the old city pulsed from afar, and the blade exploded in golden light. The elites fell back. Jace stood taller. The sword whispered again, "You called them. Now lead them." Victory. The battle didn't end clean. It ended with fire. Thorn's team blew the eastern wall, sending alien fuel tanks into the sky. Smoke rolled. One final alien general tried to escape, but Lyra stopped him with a blade of light drawn from the AI core itself. At last, the base was silent, and the human flag, burned, faded but proud, was raised over Drenarfor. For the first time in generations, humans had taken a world back. The aftershock. Across the galaxy, alien screens blinked red. Unknown human force. Seized Drenar 4. Alien high councils panicked. Reports came in. The flame throne is active. The blade of origin is confirmed real. The boy commands an army. In the capital, the seer of Zor-K stood before a massive war map. Her eyes burned with fury. You said the throne was broken. A soldier trembled. It was. But it chose again. The seer whispered, "Then we must crush them now." She stepped to a tall black machine in the center of the room. A prison. Inside it floated a man in chains, his body aged, his skin pale. It was an old hero, a fallen king, the original bearer of the throne. The seer smiled. Let's remind them why they feared us. The last stand at the throne of flame. The stars had changed. For centuries, they watched as humans fell silent, as their cities burned, as their names faded from history books. But now, they watched something else. A spark, a sword, a throne that refused to die. And the spark had become a fire. The betrayal. Jace Raylan never saw the betrayal coming. After the victory at Drenar 4, celebrations lit the ruins of the base. Humans danced. Music played from old radios. Children laughed, some for the first time in their lives. But peace is fragile. In the dark of night, a traitor, one of their own, slipped into the command tent and disabled the flame beacon. Before sunrise, a signal had been sent to the Zor-K Empire. Coordinates, strength, weaknesses. And when the sun rose, it rose red. Because the sky was full of warships. Black as shadow, bigger than cities, engines like thunder. The full force of the alien empire had arrived. The capture. Jace and the others fought bravely. But this was no scouting party. This was a full fleet. They fired orbital shock cannons, dropped shield drones, and flooded the ground with elite hunters. The humans were outgunned. And worst of all, the sword didn't answer. Jace shouted to it, but the blade of origin flickered. You are not ready to destroy. Not yet. In the chaos, Thorn was badly injured, his chest crushed under falling steel. Jace stayed by his side too long. And that's when the Zor-K came. 10 of them, clad in gold armor, with gravity cuffs and neural spikes. Jace fought with everything he had, but it wasn't enough. The last thing he saw was the stars turning upside down. Then, darkness. The alien trial. He woke in chains. A massive black hall stretched out before him. Walls dripped with molten light. The air was cold and dry. Alien voices echoed like drums. At the far end sat the seer of Zor-K, high ruler of the empire. Her eyes were like ice, her fingers long and sharp. In front of her, hundreds of aliens stood, watching, waiting. And behind Jace, millions of humans watched too. Across hidden screens, across shattered worlds, their hearts froze as they saw him there. Beaten, bloodied, chained, the seer stepped forward. This is what they follow, she sneered. A child with a stolen weapon. She turned to the crowd. This is why we kept them small. Why we erased their past. Because even their broken sparks are dangerous. She faced Jace again. What will you say, human, before your fire dies? Jace raised his head, blood on his lips, eyes burning. And he whispered, Then why does your hand shake? The seer froze. The crowd murmured. And in that moment, something ancient shifted. The blade returns. In the ruins of the flame throne, the blade of origin lay still. Humans huddled in fear. Thorn, half-conscious, held the sword in his hand, whispering, Come on, old friend. He needs you now. Then the blade glowed. It rose. It screamed across the sky like a comet. It broke through ships, tore through metal, and flew into the heart of the alien capital. Straight to Jace. The crowd gasped as the sword appeared in the air. The chains around Jace's hands melted, the cuffs shattered, and the sword floated before him. Hair of flame, do you rise? The voice asked in his mind. Jace stood slowly. I do. The last stand. The chamber erupted in panic. Guards rushed forward, weapons drawn. Jace grabbed the sword. It roared with fire. A wall of golden flame spread around him, burning through the ground. He stepped forward, slow, steady, like a king returning to his throne. The seer screamed, "Kill him!" But Jace didn't stop. "Shield," he whispered, and the sword wrapped him in light. He moved like wind, each strike clean, each flame controlled. The alien guards fell one by one, not dead, but broken. He didn't need to destroy. He needed to prove that humans weren't savages. They were alive. The throne ascends. As Jace reached the center of the room, the floor cracked open. Stone peeled away. Light poured upward. A platform rose, shaped like a circle of fire. The true throne, hidden beneath the capital for centuries, forgotten by even the Zorkai. It had waited, and now it opened its arms to him. Jace climbed the steps. The sword hovered above him. The flame on his chest blazed brighter than ever. "Speak," the blade said, "and let them hear you." The speech heard across the stars. Jace looked out at the galaxy. Billions of screens tuned in. He raised the sword, now glowing in gold, blue, and silver. "I am Jace Raylan, human, flame-bearer, and son of a forgotten people. You erased our names. You hid our history. You call us small. But we are still here. We bleed. We cry. We break. But we rise. We don't follow empires. We follow the fire inside. From now on, no human will kneel again." He raised the sword higher. "We remember who we are. And now, so will you." The collapse of the empire. That moment shattered the empire. Across space, alien soldiers dropped their weapons. Some wept. Others knelt. They remembered what it meant to face a people who refused to die. And the humans, they stood taller. They raised the flame. And for the first time in history, the Zorkai lowered their flags. A new era. Weeks passed. Peace talks began. The flame throne was moved, rebuilt in orbit around Earth. Jace sat not as king, but as guardian, a protector, a guide. Thorn recovered. Lyra joined the new Flame Council. The Blade of Origin rested beside the throne, silent but awake, because it knew the war was not just against aliens, it was against forgetting. And now, no one would forget again. A flame that never dies. Jace stood one last time beneath the stars. He looked out at the rebuilt cities, the rising ships, the human flags waving high. The voice of the sword echoed in his heart. "Well done, Flamebearer, but remember, your fire is not the end. It is the beginning." He smiled and whispered, "Let them come. We're ready now."